What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Locked On Reds podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Carr. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about Nick Castellanos and Jesse Winker's debuts by looking at some other Reds debuts in the All-Star game. And I've got a lot of draft stuff to get to with our friend Jeff Ellis from the Locked On Indians podcast. He covers everything about the draft. We're going to talk a lot with him about that today. Jam-packed episode. Thanks for joining me. Let's roll the graphic.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, guys? Welcome in, and gals. Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast today on this All-Star Tuesday. If you're just finding the show here on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed. I've got something for you every day talking about our Cincinnati Reds. And if you're listening on a podcasting app, make sure that you're following the podcast. You can follow me on Twitter as well at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs, and follow the show at Locked On Reds, and save the Locked On Reds line number into your phone at 513-549-0159. All right, today, real quick, I want to get to this All-Star stuff. We've got a lot of draft stuff coming up today, but real quick, let's talk about the All-Star game, because Jesse Winker and Nick Castellanos are going to be batting 5th and 6th, respectively, starting in right and left field. Looking forward to seeing what they can bring to the table, as the last time we saw the All-Star game, Joey Votto and Scooter Gennett both homered. In fact, Scooter is the first debut that I want to get to when you look at what Reds have done in their All-Star game debuts, because that was his only appearance in 2019, and he hit a 2-run home run in the bottom of the 9th to send it into extras. Now, the American League ended up winning in extras, but that's beside the point. You also go back to 2017, talking about Reds debuting in the All-Star game with a hit. Zach Cozart made an appearance. He actually started at shortstop and hit 9th. He got his first hit in his first at-bat in the 3rd inning off of Dellin Betances. It was a single. He ended up going 1 for 2 on the day. That was the first hit by a Red in the All-Star game since 2010, whenever Scott Rowland made his debut as a Cincinnati Red. His first Reds appearance. He had been in the All-Star game before that because Scott Rowland was awesome, but he got a hit. He came into that game off the bench and relieved David Wright in the 5th inning. He singled off Phil Hughes. A couple innings later, he went 1 for 2 on the day. Then you have to go all the way back to 2005 for the next Reds debut with a hit in the All-Star game. It was Felipe Lopez. You might remember Felipe. He went 1 for 2 in that game as well. Got a single after relieving Aramis Ramirez at 3rd base, which is interesting because he always played shortstop for the Reds. But he had a hit in the 8th off of Joe Nathan. The reason that you'll remember Felipe Lopez, though, was not for that hit. He was involved in that god-awful trade that the Reds sent him, Austin Kearns, Ryan Wagner to the Nationals for Gary Majeski, Bill Bray, Royce Clayton, and a bag of peanuts. All right, not a bag of peanuts. There's a couple other prospects who didn't really amount to anything, but let's be honest here. The best player that the Reds got back in that trade was Bill Bray. And if you're telling me that the career of Austin Kearns, coupled with Felipe Lopez and Ryan Wagner, amounted to Bill Bray, yeah. Anyway, let's go back to talking about the All-Star game, because we have to go all the way back. After 2005, we go all the way back to 1992, whenever Bip Roberts made his only All-Star appearance. He went 2 for 2 after replacing Barry Bonds in the 7th inning. Notably, he hit a 2-run single in the 9th inning against Dennis Eckersley. It was not anywhere near as dramatic as Scooter Gennett's 2-run homer, though, because the National League was already down 13-4. And that is the first multi-hit Reds performance in the All-Star game since Ken Griffey Sr. in 1980. Yeah, let that sit in for a minute. Since 1980, the Reds have only had 2 multi-hit performances, and the last one was in 1992. maybe Castellanos can flip that today. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe at least Castellanos and Winker can lead the National League to a win. They won 3 times in a row there from 2010 to 2012. But overall, in my lifetime, since 1989, the American League is 25-6. Yeah, that's what you call domination. So hopefully they can reverse that trend tonight. All right, we've got a lot of draft stuff to get to. I want to talk about that here with Jeff Ellis here in a minute. Before we get into that, though, I wanted to let you know that if you need a part for your car, the best place to go is rockauto.com, because they've got every single part for your car and they can send it right to your door. They've been doing this for over 20 years, a family-owned business, and whether you are a professional mechanic or you're just an everyday Joe that's trying to replace a brake pad, they have the same prices for you as well. If you've got a classic car that you're trying to restore, or if you've got a Honda Civic that you want to reupholster, it's all the same. Same prices. There is no price tiers or anything like that. They're not trying to get one over on you easy, because rockauto.com is reliably low prices on all of their parts, and they have all the parts for your car. Go to their website, and in the checkout section in the How'd You Hear About Us area, type in Locked On to let them know that your pal Jeff sent you from the Locked On Reds podcast. I get my parts from rockauto.com, and you should too. Go to rockauto.com, and in the checkout section, type in the How'd You Hear About Us area, Locked On. rockauto.com has all of the parts that your car will ever need. All right, for these next couple of segments, there has been the MLB Draft going on currently. That was really great English, but whatever. The Reds have been making some picks, and so have all of the other teams. The Reds had 3 first-round picks to work with this year when it came to the compensatory rounds and things like that. So lots of talent has been added to the Reds farm system, and the man who has been all over this, he is the host of the Locked On Indians podcast, but he is also all over everything MLB Draft. He is Jeff Ellis, and he joins me here today. Jeff, I appreciate you taking some time to talk some Reds draft with me, because when it comes to the talent that the Reds have added, I'm not necessarily super knowledgeable, but I know you are. First of all, though, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm gonna have some trout wine right here.
Oh, that's a good thing right there. That's a good way to
start referencing the most recent pick of the Reds. If anyone's out there going, "What is he talking about?" I swear, I'm not. Just having some fun with people.
I like it. We're going to dive into this here, because I wanted to start, obviously, the first pick. And we've talked about this before. I've had you on in years past talking about the draft. Nobody drafts for current needs. They draft for future needs. They try to look down the road multiple years and see what the organization is going to look like. So whenever there were fans who saw that Matt McLain is a shortstop, their immediate first reaction was, well, what about Jose Barrero? Don't they like him? It's not that way at all. But tell me about this dude from UCLA.
Well, he's not a shortstop. Let's be honest. He's a shortstop in college, but I don't think he's no one really thinks he's going to stick there. Everyone talked about the top 8 in this draft, and then the draft got weird. Top 8 slid all around. I was working on my big board. Yes, there is kind of an 8 names type of deal, but I had 12. I had a 12 cutoff, where then things started to shift a little bit more. And those top 12, especially in kind of the 8 to 12 range, are really push them around, change them in and out how you want. I thought they were all kind of similar, and Matt McLain was the last of that group. So I think he was a good value, just plain and simply there. If he doesn't break his finger at the beginning of May, he might go in the top 5. The analogous player from a year ago might be Dylan Dingler from Ohio State, who, we're both Ohio people. I don't know how many of our fans follow Ohio State baseball. It can be a little bit brutal to follow that in general, but Dylan Dingler was the catcher whose fallback position was center field, had 2 years of okay stuff, and then really started to break out before COVID happened. No one knew what to make of him. I put him 14th on my big board because he had enough outlying information that I'm like, this is a player who could be on the rise. And then he slid because he didn't get those opportunities. Teams will never admit to it, but May matters more than any other month. Like, if you are a hitter and you're hot in March and cold in May, and you're hot in May and cold in March and have the exact same numbers, you might see 40, 50 pick difference between those players, because teams very much are, what have you done for me lately? And it's also, when do they get out to see him? And you understand it to a degree too, to be fair. Like if it's an SEC player, May is a lot harder level of competition than March, where I'm a big Tyler Black Wright State fan, but Wright State faced Vandy in March, and Tyler Black did get a big hit off of, keeping it in Ohio here, off of Kumar Rocker, which also helped for him. But facing a Wright State versus facing the SEC schedule, you get that to a degree. McLain getting hurt. I mean, I don't think it's a pun, but it's just bad English to say getting hurt his value. But it did. It's one of those situations where he doesn't break that. I had him like 9th on my board, and then I got to see other players and continued to judge and evaluate, and he slid down to 12 because of the injury. I just didn't. His first year was not great. He was a slow starter this year as well, which was not ideal. So yeah, I mean, if he had that extra time, I feel like he would have been higher than this. Like if nothing else, it's like, if you're going to debate Frelick versus McLain, if McLain had more data, the Brewers probably would have leaned in maybe more to McLain than Frelick. I can't say that for sure. I mean, I ended up having Frelick higher on my board just due to having more good data. Whereas McLain, it was just this year. He's, I'll be curious to see, do you try him in center field? Do you try him at second base? Those are probably the two most likely positions. But, he's a first and good prospect. There's some Garrett Mitchell to him when you're just looking at another kid who went to UCLA, had that high, potential first round value out of high school, struggled as a freshman, but had the traits and tools, and people really liked him. So I think that is a strong pick. And like I said, I had him 12th on my big board. Before my final correction, he was 9th, and I would not have argued anyone who wanted to say he's the top 10 player in this draft.
You love to see the fact that he was a first rounder out of high school and he had the option to go to UCLA. What kind of trajectory do you think he has? Is it 2 years, 3 years? What are we looking at with McLain?
Fully healthy, I'd just probably lean more to the 3, because I think there's still just more development to occur. Like I said, I lost the 2020 season like everyone did. His 2019 was not good. At least top of my head. I think I could watch me be wrong there, but that's just top of my head. Trying to remember, I believe that a lot of his value kind of came from what he showed in the summer and the physical tools he had to begin with. And like I said, it was a slow start this year. He's finally starting to get together, broken finger. So things are weird now. The Indians promoted a draft pick, for instance, who they took last year, is already in Double-A, and the Indians are the king of the slow plays. I don't know how fast or slow the Reds typically are, but we're seeing teams be more aggressive in general. So maybe it's 2, but I would more lean towards 3.
Okay. And kind of thinking of him like at the second and third base, and maybe he plays in some outfield or something like that. It's interesting to note that, you've got guys moving around. I just like the athleticism with the pick, because it seems here lately the Reds have really relied on third basemen to play the athletic positions on the field. And I notice a departure from that with the pick of Matt McLain. Kind of moving on, because there's a lot to get to with these different guys.
Just laughing there if anyone heard that, because I was looking at, as the draft is occurring, I'm kind of clicking over to look at the list. The Indians took a guy I've been projecting them to take since 2020. So it's just humorous when that finally happens, or I'm like, oh, this is such an Indians type of guy. I've been cares, and it just happens. So I apologize when I'm laughing on air, but yeah, with the Trent Denholm pick there, I'm like, oh, hey, that's funny.
That's all right. Get a hit on that pick. That's a good one. Let's look at the second pick of the Reds real quick. It's interesting to note, like looking at the different guys that they've picked throughout the many rounds, most of them are college players. This guy's not. He's a high schooler, outfielder, Jay Allen from John Carroll High School. How does Jay look? Number one, how talented is he? Where does he project to play on the field?
He is, he's a 3-sport player. There was a feeling like he could have probably played at a lower division football. He wasn't like a big, he's not like the Will Taylor or the Lonnie Whites when it comes to football, but he could have still played there. He had a lot of late first round run. If I pull up my big board, which I have open, I just have to scan. I think I had him like a little bit lower than this. I want to say he ended up being like high 40s for me, but 47 was where I ended up slotting him, just because he is raw. He is developmental. We know Oakland likes athletes, though. It's one of those things that We know well about this. It's one of those things that I've been hearing for years with them. It's a good athletic profile. He is a big kid. He runs well. There's power, projection. He fits their type. I was not surprised to see that selection at all. He's a lotto ticket.
Okay. I like lottery tickets. Hopefully the Reds can kind of capitalize on that upside. Do you think, because the question was with him, and I heard the conversation with the Reds scouting director, Brad Metter, that they have long conversations with high school prospects to figure out if they are ready for the major leagues and get that feel for him. Not only is he ready for the major leagues, but do you think he will sign, or will he opt to go to college and try and bet on himself in 3 years, maybe getting a higher draft slot?
He's going to the Reds. Everyone's signing. That's, I know it always comes up, but like I have zero doubt that he is going to end up a Red. I will say this, looking at their list in front of me right now, he was my third rated player the Reds grabbed in this year's draft. So I had him, they grabbed 3 of my top, I said he was 47. So they grabbed 3 of my top 47, and he was the third of that listing.
It's always good to hear. Moving on to, hopefully, who is the third guy on that list.
You're right. You are 100%.
Yeah, I like the fact, and I know that you mentioned that McLain's not really a shortstop, but I like the fact that they're focused on the center of the field, because I was having a conversation with the Reds guy off the air a couple of days ago about that. It's like they've asked some corner guys to play in the middle, and it's worked to a degree, but it's also been frustrating to watch. Now they're going to go from middle to build from the outside there. I like the idea that they're taking the athletes and stuff like that there in the middle. What do you think about Matt Nelson and how he profiles in this farm system?
So I was a big Matt Nelson fan. Now there's a lot of players where you kind of get this line of, is he a senior? Isn't he a senior? Yeah, he has more years of eligibility, but he has a 99 birthday. A lot of people kept acting like he was a true senior. Now, there isn't a player in this class. Well, I guess there would be a few who couldn't go back to college just because they shouldn't have been there. Not say they shouldn't have been, but like in a normal year, they would have graduated last year. So they get that extra year of eligibility. Nelson still would have had another year. I still think, which I make a big deal about this when I'm doing my writing, teams have to go through and look at cost per player, and you have to value that into a player's cost. For me, it was easy to make Henry Davis number 1. Not only did I think he was a fantastic bat, a fantastic player, but when I factored in cost, to put him in a tier by himself. Now, I know a lot of people don't agree with me with that, and a lot of people didn't have Davis 1. But you can see what the Pirates did, and that's why you have to factor costs. They came back and rocked it in round 2 and 3. There wasn't anyone out there who was not like, wow, that's impressive. And again, Henry Davis was worthy of the first overall pick just on what he did. But when you factor in cost, for me, it became a no-brainer. And when you look at Matt Nelson, when you factor in what is likely going to be cost as well, it's a bit of a no-brainer there too, because he really broke out this year for Florida State. I think he ended up leading the country in home runs. He's not the best defender, but he's good enough. And one of those situations, especially if we get to the robot umps, those guys who are mediocre defenders, it becomes better for them.
Right.
Because framing is going to be a thing.
Yeah.
So I also just like to see a guy who, he was okay. He was okay. He obviously put in the time. He put in time in 2020 when everything else, a lot of people, myself included, it's 2020. I'm staying indoors. I added a few pounds. I got that COVID weight. He did not. He worked. And you like to see that guy who put in the work. And just from a production standpoint, I ended up with him, just to give, again, the whole comparison. I think he was high 30s on my board, 34. So I had him as the 34th best player in this class. There's a good chance he falls on his face. He does have some risk because the margin for error for him is thin. But you also have to just be patient with any catcher. Reds fans know that as well as anyone, with power hitting catcher named Tyler Stevenson there, who was the 11th overall pick back in the day. And there were points where people had written him off. And catchers are as risky as pitchers. Like, that just needs to be known. People don't realize that, even probably more so. And, I talked about it on the draft podcast. I was kind of curious as I was digging into catchers. Over the last 3 years, there are 2 catchers who every single year have qualified, played enough to qualify, and have a runs created plus over 100. And that's Grandal and Real Muto. And you think of the cost to have them. I mean, just finding someone who is league average and can play every day is a near impossible task. So if Nelson can give you that, then you've got a top 3 catcher just out of the gate whenever that player gets there. I mean, he's not there tomorrow, but I think the value at that position can never be understated.
It's huge, and that's why the Pirates went for Henry Davis. I understood that. I know there's a lot of people that were freaking out about that, but if you can hit on that guy and you get that sure thing behind the plate, then everything else on the infield and in the lineup just gets that much better. Because you see so many teams that are just like, man, let's plug a Martin Maldonado in there, and he's going to catch, and he'll hit every other 3 days or something like that. So it's nice to see whenever guys get the high upside like a Matt Nelson. Hopefully the Reds can develop to that. I wanted to look at one more pick before I got your take on a sleeper. And we've gone quite long here on this segment. I appreciate you doing
this. Sorry,
I
end up being a talker. I can't help myself when it comes to the draft.
Hey, it's all right with me. We'll get to that in just a moment because I also forgot we need to shout out our sponsor, betonline.ag. They have a great offer. If you go there today, set up your profile, put in the promo code Locked On, you'll get 50% added onto your initial deposit. Plus, I'll give you a tip from time to time. With the All-Star game tonight, not really feeling one sort of way, whether it comes to winner or loser. The over-under is set at 11, which I kind of think is about right. And we mentioned earlier on in today's podcast that the AL kind of owns this matchup ever since I've been alive, 26-5 since 1989. Just absolutely ridiculous how they've owned this matchup. So maybe the NL can come back this year. They do have the right guys in the 5 and 6 hole, and Castellanos and Winker. So we'll see how that goes. But check out betonline.ag. They got great lines for the All-Star game. For the NBA Finals, you can check out futures for the NFL, MMA, boxing, all that good stuff. BetOnline.ag, and set up your profile with the promo code Locked On to get 50% added onto your initial deposit. All right, I almost forgot that. I'm glad that I kind of remembered it. It's going to be a weirdly chunky mid-segment there, but hey, that's all right because we're talking about the future of this Reds farm system. And one more guy specifically before we jump into some sleepers, the first pitcher that the Reds took this year in Andrew Abbott. And shout out to our friend Chad Dotson over at Red Leg Nation Radio. I'm sure he'll be happy to see a Virginia dude in the Reds organization. What do we know about Abbott? How does he profile? I know that the last time the Reds took a pitcher, his name is Nick Lodolo, and we're looking to see him maybe later this year, hopefully, at least definitely at the beginning of next year. What does Abbott look like in his development?
So I was just kind of doing a quick search because wasn't Nick Howard from Virginia as well? Just to kind of go back and talk about some recent. So the issue with Virginia is this gets me in trouble with some Virginia fans all the time. Virginia success rate to the majors is horrific. 5th best player from the University of Virginia to get to the big leagues is Brandon Geyer. They have produced 0 starting pitchers who have successfully transitioned to the big leagues in the history of the MLB Draft. The one player, Daniel Lynch, who has been successful from there, kind of told them to shove it when they wanted to have him switch and change how he was approaching pitching. Was kind of the opposite of what happens, where they tinker with approaches for college success, and then it doesn't translate well. I mean, you can look recently. Think how excited everyone got about Derek Fisher, the outfielder from Virginia with Arizona, and not Arizona, drafted by Houston, went to Toronto as a trade piece and was just recently designated for assignment. Yeah, there's Ryan Zimmerman, and there's Sean Doolittle, who was not a pitcher there. And yeah, it's not a good list. Mark Reynolds is your number 3 most productive player in that program's history. So I always get nervous.
So he's up against it, is what you're saying.
It's a lot of Danny Holtzens, and then there's Connor Jones, who was supposed to be a first rounder and was not, and players like that. And teams have gotten leery. Now, Pavin Smith is playing well. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my cat so he doesn't keep making noise. Pavin Smith is playing well after some struggles originally, so he might break into that top 5. but we're still waiting to see a starting pitcher from Virginia. It could be Abbott. He was a reliever before he kind of transitioned to a starter, and he did much better in that role this year. There were some command issues before. He's an interesting and pitch well, and I'll be curious to see if he can continue to grow. The one upside, as I give all these negatives, hey, I could say at the same time, if you're a fan of Vandy, Virginia fans always get mad at me. I'm like, well, hey, Vandy's most productive hitter ever was Pedro Alvarez. So that, it goes around to a lot of teams. But the nice thing is you guys are the Reds, and you are going to take him apart. If there's anything that was badly taught to Andrew Abbott, it will be fixed. It will be redone. I'm going to go on record now. Like, I trust the Reds. It's a place where I was kind of hoping Jaden Hill would go because of visibility. I loved when they drafted Joe Boyle a year ago because for as bad as Virginia is, Notre Dame was the worst for development for a few years. New coaching staff in 2020, they're doing a much better job. I don't want to disparage the program now. But, I mean, Andrew Abbott has a chance to be the greatest pitcher from the University of Virginia in the big leagues, because A, they really haven't had one, and B, but you can just instead run with the hot one that I'm saying, Andrew Abbott, future greatest pitcher in Virginia history in the majors. But I also just trust the Reds. Yeah, they haven't had one yet, and the Reds are really good at pitching development. So he's got that opportunity.
I absolutely love that. Plus, I mean, with Kyle Bodie and Derek Johnson and the way that they have aligned the organizational development, I remember at least in years past, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, they were talking about how if a prospect would be at Dayton, he would be learning it one way, then he'd get to Chattanooga, he'd learn it a different way, then he'd get to Louisville, and he'd learn it a different way. And so by the time he got to the major leagues, he's like, I think I can throw it to home plate. So now they are
some guys who came from the Reds, and it was like they came to the Indians. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus and say their names. It's not quite as bad. It's like I can talk about like when Mike Clevenger came in, he's like, the Angels gave me a notebook. That was their approach for a young player, but the Reds were just about as bad. And guys who would come over from that would come to the Indians and be like, oh my God, I wasted the early years of my career. I could have maybe been a major leaguer if I'd come here first. Like that was a general feel. Like they were telling people like that they felt that the Reds had significantly sent them back due to the approach you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm just glad that they've got that all figured out.
No, it's great now. It is.
There are people that are excited to work with the guys at the
100%.
I'm happy with that. So real quickly, because you've given me way more time than I've asked you. I appreciate you so much. I didn't want to take you too much away from the draft, but there are lots more picks than just those ones that we've talked about. Are there any sleepers, any later round guys that really have your antennas perked up and you're like, ooh, maybe the Reds could turn this dude into something?
So I was joking beforehand. I at least have to give my conspiracy theory. When I looked at this draft, they go out and they add Ruben Ibarra, who I'll talk about, who's 6'5", 290. And they already have Amir Garrett, and they added, Justice Thompson, who's like 6'4", 205, and just a plus athlete. I think the Reds are going to petition the league that instead of going to extra innings, games should be decided in pickup basketball games. That is my theory, that they are building a pickup basketball squad that is going to be unbeatable compared to any other. I mean, they already have a huge advantage, obviously, with Garrett, but Michael Lorenzen's such an athlete. Like I think they are building an unbeatable pickup squad. I do like Ruben Ibarra, San Jose State, small school production, 6'5", 290 is just fun to look at as a baseball player, but he walks a lot. Could have some more power there potentially. I mean, he was a double-digit guy, but when you see that 6'5", 290, you expect more power than there was. But I do like to see the walk rate. Kevin Abel was not related to Mick, but he was really good at points for Oregon. Kind of came apart this year. I think he was pressing too hard, he had some second-round talk entering 2020 as just a solid back-end guy. Goes to a perfect team to kind of get him back on track. And I mean, you and I talked about when we did that crossover draft or trade podcast, I should say, the value in someone like Wade Miley. Like if he can be like a 4-5 in a Wade Miley mode, there's value there. And then I know he's not a big name and he's probably not going to even get a big bonus, but Jack Rogers in the 9th round out of Sam Houston, teammate of Colton Cowser. And yes, it's a smaller conference with production, but when I go through his data, one of the things that stands out. So Chris Mitchell used to do the Cato system, Katoh at Fangraphs. And he was really influential in terms of me looking at data and realizing what is valuable and what isn't. And one of the big things he found when you did a big study was the value of BABIP in lower minors production, that it shows quality contact skills, and that in some respects, like, it's going to be more representative of future hit tool success than, say, batting average. So when you look at a Rogers 451 BABIP this year, 397 for his career. So yes, he is facing lower competition, but that's what you need to see. That's more important than like, I'm not even looking at his averages. I go right to BABIP. Walking 10 and 12% this year. Home runs snuck up. Like, the strikeouts are high, and it's 23% is not the worst thing as a senior, and it is a lower level competition. But normally, people would look at him in the 9th round, sign, and move on. I think there's a little bit more, maybe it's like when Mark Payton didn't he end up as the Reds pick, where he was a senior sign, where it's like, and he's played in the big leagues since then. So I'm not necessarily saying this guy's going to be a star, but could he end up on a Mark Payton type of track? Absolutely. I have to mention Jose Torres, who I think was the best defender at short I saw. I don't know if the bat's going to get better, but amongst the college group, I mean, he's at least a future utility guy with that role. I mentioned Justice Thompson. Like, after the first month with what he was doing, he had some like first and second round run. Just a good athlete, one of those guys you hope to develop. It's a fun class, even going down to like day 3 today. Directional Michigan on the board with Blake Dunn. I mentioned Mike Troutwine, who, catchers have to be smart. He's a Northwestern kid, like a 12 or 13% walk rate, double-digit home runs, not the best contact. So I was just looking at Blake Dunn because I'm like, I know this name. And this is MLB, and this is why I remember that he is the second leading scorer in the state history of Michigan. How about that? In football, second leading scorer in the entire state, was a state champion in the hurdles. He's a really interesting athlete. Some injury issues, but I'm like, I know this name. Why do I know Mike Dunn? It's because he's this guy who was a high level athlete, 6'3", 260. If you know 60s, that's on fire. Like I said, hurdle champ. Also used to be a pitcher who could hit mid-90s, so that's fun. Sean Begat was a Florida recruit in the 11th round, so someone has to be pretty good when he's leaving one college to go to Florida. So yeah, I just even here we are on day 3, and I'm 3 guys that I was like, oh yeah, I didn't remember that guy. I remember that guy. So and then it's a team where it's their developmental cycle. So I'm very curious to see what they will get out of pitching when they, it's been more of a hitter focused draft, but I think it is a solid class. It's a really solid, strong class.
Give me that athleticism. I love it. I love it.
Oh,
And you mentioned Ruben Ibarra. He has the chance to be the 4th Red ever to make it to the major leagues, whose name is Ruben. And the other guys, I don't think they drafted. They didn't draft Ruben Sierra, but they also had Ruben Rivera and Ruben Mateo. So it'll be fun to see if
too.
Yeah, and we can.
I remember all 3 of them.
I just don't remember. I know Sierra was a Red, but it was like for a half a second. I remember him as a Yankee. So
yeah, I remember him as, like, for me, he's a Texas Ranger. Like, that's where my mind goes with Ruben Sierra. He's Texas Ranger, and then all the bouncing around, and it's a fun career to look at because it's a peaks and flow, or not peak, ebb and flow, high peaks, low valleys. I'm confusing my stuff, but yeah, he's. Hey, it's the long tradition of Yankees and Reds outfielders with Paul O'Neill, Ruben Sierra, and Roberto Kelly.
Oh yeah, he had a lot of those peaks and valleys, guys. But Jeff, dude, I appreciate you. It's funny too. You mentioned, and before we go, you mentioned the mock GM episode that we have. Hoping to do more of those with more hosts from the Locked On Network. But you had mentioned that Tito really loved Mike Freeman, and there's a great stat on him. I've been hammering this stat in the first half of the season, sort of. Whenever he starts in the lineup, the Reds are 9-0, so undefeated whenever Mike Freeman starts.
Can't get any better than that. Him. It's it's just he's a winner.
Never mind. He's hitting 214 and he's slugging 214. That's another topic entirely. But hey, it's all right. Jeff, I thank you so much for joining me and talking draft with us. You can follow Jeff Ellis on Twitter at
Jeff MLB Draft.
And he's got lots more takes where it comes to the draft there on Twitter. Jeff, thanks so much, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
No, I'd love to come back. Thanks for having me on.
And that'll do it for us here today. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. We'll talk to each and every one of you again tomorrow right here on the Locked On Reds podcast. Make sure that you are subscribed. You follow on the app that you're currently listening to, and you follow me on Twitter at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. Follow the show at Locked On Reds. But that'll do it for us here today. Now, hopefully Castellanos and Winker can get us some hits tonight, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow right here on the Locked On Reds podcast. Thank you so much.